Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Davie-vh in the 5-minute pool on ICC. It's a new day, and we're playing e4. Let's go ahead and play d4 and go to the mainline French. Maybe I'll play a Tarrasch variation with knight d2. I'm still on the e4 train for now. I'm hoping it doesn't buck me off anytime soon. Let's play bishop d3. You can go c5, I'll play c3. I sort of tangentially know these lines. I don't study them actively from the white side, but in looking at games of my students and stuff, I've become somewhat familiar with them. So I'm going to do my best. Queen b6 is not a move I've seen before, but I'm sure it's completely fine. In fact, it might even be theoretical. Usually black seems to undermine the center with the queen on d8 rather than popping it out to b6. So Davie is asking me what I'm going to do with my center, so I just take on f6. Probably I should castle now. I wonder if I can get a quick attack against e6. Or maybe I can play bishop f4 and just look to swap the dark square bishops. Usually that's desirable for white if they can. And the queen is attacking down here on b2, but I feel like that would be a risky pawn grab for him if he went for it. Maybe I should play rook b1 first, though. Something along those lines, or a3 and b4. So bishop f4, take, queen takes b2. Let's say rook e1, he might just castle. I'm not sure how that's working out. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play b3. And if castles, maybe then bishop f4 on the next move. So let's just reliably ensure that he can't play queen takes b2. That's my concern. So yeah, now we'll go here. This player is fairly high rated, 24-17. I have not seen them before. They just retreat. Okay, let's take. So this tends to favor white in this line if you're able to make this trade of the dark square bishops and leave black with just the light square bishop. Because I can hope to occupy e5 in the future. Like now I might go knight g3 and knight e5. So he breaks with e5. That makes sense. Yeah, he doesn't want a situation where that pawn can't move forward. So now he's going to take. I can play knight d4 after this, though. And he can't take because a bishop takes h7. So I'm probably going to do that. He does have knight e4. Maybe knight e4 is something I should avoid. But I can always take, and he has a weak pawn. Yeah, okay, so let's do this. And if knight e4, I'm probably going to grab on e4. Because I want to get rid of that active knight. And f3 can't be played because of queen takes d4 check. Okay, so just thinking how I want to play this. Yeah, so I think I'm going to take and then play the knight back to c2 and try to blockade on the e3 square. Maybe even play queen d4 if I can first. This looks passive, but I want to lay siege to this e-pawn in the long run. And as long as I stabilize the position, I should be able to start doing that. Okay, I'm thinking queen d4 before proceeding with my plan. It's useful to offer a queen trade and try to get my queen in a slightly better position. If he trades, then my knight is not bound for e3 anytime soon, but I will still be stopping him from playing pawn e3 and getting rid of this weak pawn. So he retreats. All right, so now knight e3. Let's do it. He was hitting my knight. I like this for white. I don't see him getting an attack, so... Okay, this drops the a7 pawn if I want to go after that. He's going to play rook d2 and get some counterplay. So take, rook d2, rook ac1, let's say. It is kind of tough for him to attack this pawn, however. I could play it safe with queen c4 check, but taking on a7 is the principled move. A classic dilemma in chess. Okay, let's go for it. Play it safe or go for material or an attack or something desirable versus playing to swap pieces. I could also play rook a d1. Maybe that's even better, just looking to trade. Yeah, let's go rook a d1. Would be nice to get rid of this rook. Note that my queen defends a2. You'll notice that I'm not playing with any of the sound on right now. So the piece noises on ICC. It's been messing with my computer for some reason. Like I get this low buzz when ICC makes a move. And it doesn't seem to be happening in any of my other applications or any other time I use my speakers. But it creates this low buzz that was really distracting. So I'm just playing without sound for now until I can figure out what the problem is. Also, my mouse will randomly stop moving for a second, like my computer is thinking or something. Okay, so let's take, and then after he takes, I'm just going to play rook d1 and attack the queen. He can play queen e2, but I think it's still good to do this. Or is rook f1 safer? So rook d1, queen e2, if I take b7, something like bishop g4, but rook f1 always just covers everything, doesn't it? Yeah, I think so. Let's do this. He kind of has to play queen e2. There's not many other ways to keep the attack going. So let's take. Show me what you got, Davie. I mean, f2 is vulnerable, bear in mind. So like if this bishop moves, he might be hitting that pawn, but I see a lot of safeguards. Like if bishop c8, I have queen d5 check, and I can bring my queen back to d2 even if I need to. If something like bishop g4 or bishop h3, I can just play rook f1 or throw in a check on d5 first if I want, and then again that queen d2 move. That's probably best of all. Yeah, like if I check here, let's just do that first of all, just to force his king somewhere pretty bad. Now I can even take on g4 if I want, but I think even stronger is queen d2. Just looking to make sure that doesn't blunder somehow. Because if rook takes f2, I take, and he's got a back rank issue. So, yeah, I think this is the way to go. Stopping any funny business. Threatening to trade queens. If the queen moves away to like b5 or a6, I just grab on g4. I have a minute left, though, mind you, so let's not get overconfident. I may still need to win a one position. If he plays like a rook over, like rook c8, then I can play queen d8 and checkmate him. So that's nice. So probably he needs a move like h6 or something in order to defend. He's going to trade. Okay, so now the bishop's hanging. He needs to move that somewhere. Plays the bishop back. Let's just gain a little space with tempo on the bishop. Let's push these pawns now. See if we can get him rolling. b4 I can play. You can't take it because of rook d8. So I might get a chance to establish these pawns up here on light squares very quickly. Just taking and hitting his bishop. He can put the bishop in on f3, but that doesn't really accomplish much. Yeah, let's just get behind. I know he can try rook c8 or something, but I could even just play rook c1 if I want to be absolutely safe. In fact, let's do that. Just no back rank business at all. And we'll push the b pawn after this. His bishop is useless and out of play for now. Yeah, so he's trying to route it somewhere better. Keep pushing. Push the passed pawns. They must be pushed as per classic strategy. Okay, keep pushing. a6 coming. That's going to be it soon. Yeah, he could even just push again, because if he takes here, we're promoting with check. Okay, check. And then take the rook next move. He's still playing. Okay. He's not going down without a fight. I'm not even going to look for the most efficient way to checkmate. It's not worth it in such scenarios. You just play the simplest moves and don't sweat it when you have little time left. I wasn't in any serious danger with 25 seconds, but the strategy still holds. All right, so we win that game. My impression is that these simplifications favored white. Once we get to this position, we have a knight versus a bishop. There are pawns on both wings, so you might think that that favors the bishop, but the fact that this e-pawn is weak is the problem. If we were to put this pawn on f7 and black's queen were not just hanging, then white would probably not be better at all, and in fact might be worse on the open board, but this represents a long-term weakness, and black has 3 pawn islands. I only have 2, and I was able to play against that weakness, and black probably helped me out. Like, rook a8 was not necessary, giving up the a7 pawn, and then his play just fizzled after this. I was able to defuse rook d2, and none of the threats on, like, f2, let's say, ever worked out for black. So let's go back and have a look at this one. So a French. When I was playing e4 consistently, I usually played knight c3 against the French, but I gotta be honest, the French is one opening where I've never felt like I've had a completely comfortable repertoire from the white side. I think it's a tricky line to face. Bobby Fischer famously had problems against the French, particularly the French winnower. He didn't have a great record from the white side. Knight d2 is probably a line that's going to suit more positional or strategic players because it avoids the pin with bishop b4, which can produce some highly unbalanced and tactical positions. In fact, there's a line called the poison pawn variation that goes like this. Knight e7, queen g4, and black lets this pawn on g7 hang. So they'll play like knight here, take, rook g8, take, and then take here, I believe, is how it goes. And it gets weird. So knight d2, on the other hand, white just protects the e4 pawn. You do block the dark square bishop, but this can lead to quieter channels oftentimes. Black plays knight f6. c5 is another major move here. Knight c6 is another move that you see from time to time, the Guimard variation. So all this was played. And then I want to defend my d-pawn with a pawn, so that's why I played c3. So more often in this position, I have seen knight c6 and then knight e2. It's important for white to develop the knight to e2 because if you develop the knight to f3, you can have some coordination problems because these knights are stepping on each other's toes. You might call them superfluous knights. They're taking away each other's squares. And if black were to play queen b6, there's not a great way for white to defend this pawn. Black is attacking it 3 times, and white is only defending it twice with the c pawn and the knight. Note that I cannot play knight b3 here to try to defend it again because black has c4, forking the 2 minor pieces. So actually, I think this has been played before, and white usually just plays to gambit the pawn. They'll like castle and let black take, and white will try to generate some play with something like this. But it's worth just noting and remembering, if you play the white side of this line, that in the Tarrasch, this knight typically comes to e2, so the other knight, the queenside knight, can come to f3 and reinforce the center. So the line I usually see here is this, and then take, take, and now f6, with black leaving the queen out, back on d8. Take, knight takes, and play will develop from there. Could be similar to the game, actually, as far as what white wants to accomplish. Because queen b6 didn't turn out to be too helpful, or at least that's the way it seemed to me. Maybe bishop b4 check is better here, but I block, and the trade of the dark square bishops is not something white is going to protest. It's helpful for them to get the dark square bishops off the board. I have pawns on dark squares in the center, so this piece might be restricted. So black played f6. He took with the knight, and then I castled, and then bishop d6. Let me add in the engine right here. So I was debating whether to play bishop f4 right away, but I wasn't certain if we trade, if black could take here and just be greedy. Maybe they can, but it wasn't entirely clear to me. Rook b1 or rook e1. Let's say rook b1. Take. Queen c1. Not sure what the point of that move is. Maybe taking away some squares from the black queen, trying to threaten stuff like this, maybe? Yeah, this requires more calculation, and in a blitz game, I'm probably not going to risk that most of the time when my position is otherwise acceptable. So I just played b3 to make sure queen takes b2 is never possible. And then castles, bishop f4, get those dark square bishops off the board. And black played queen c7, maybe trying to make their queen relevant again. Note that black cannot go for the d-pawn due to the typical trick here. Bishop takes h7. And after black takes, we win their queen. They could play, however, I saw this flick across the screen here, the engine recommendation, e5 after taking on d4. And it is true that these knights are forked, so black will regain the material. Knight takes. Queen h5, threatening this, and maybe the knight behind it. Knight f6, take, and possibly white wins a pawn. Looks to be that way. So instead, though, black just played queen back to c7, and I was able to get this trade in. Rook e1. And I can understand why black wanted to play e5, because this is a backward pawn. And when you notice a backward pawn, look at the square immediately in front of that pawn. In this case, the e5 square. Often that square will be weak as well. That's a prime outpost for a white knight. Let's say black were just to play something like bishop d7. I would probably go knight g3, and now e5 is going to be harder for black to achieve since I have 3 pieces protecting that square. And I would just love to sink this knight in here, especially at a moment when black may be unable to take it. Black might be able to take on d4 here, but let's just say that I was able to play this move. Black cannot take on e5 because I take and I would fork the queen and the knight. So I can completely understand why black would want to play e5 and break. They accept an isolated pawn in doing this, but maybe they're avoiding a worse fate and having a passive position. So here I took, we got these trades in, and here I went knight d4, so making use of this tactical device again. And knight e4 was the answer. Possibly this is a mistake in view of what happened. Maybe black should retain that knight. But I think if black were to move the queen, then I gotta believe white's slightly better regardless, just due to the pawn structure. Anatoly Karpov, the former world champion, was fantastic in these types of positions. Actually, on the white side of the Tarrasch French, he had a ridiculous score in games against grandmasters and all levels of opposition, really. He was a connoisseur of this line. I've studied some of his games. So knight e4 was played. We swapped. And then I played the knight back to c2. The engine says that f3, a more straightforward way of attacking this pawn, is better. Maybe I can circumvent the whole process of laying siege to that pawn and instead just attack it, because note that black cannot take. They would lose their queen. And if e3, I assume this pawn is going to get swarmed. Knight c2 here. Yeah, I can just take it. So, yeah, f3 very well could be the best move, and maybe I just win this pawn straight away. But I played knight c2, bishop f5, and then queen d4. Possibly black should just swap right now, because then it's harder for my white knight to come to this desirable e3 blockading square. I still think I would rather be white in this position, but the engine thinks it's close to equal. Maybe because this knight is not as stable as it would be here. But instead they didn't want to go for that, so they played the queen back. But now I get the knight to the promised land, e3. Yeah, and this seemed to be working in white's favor. So rook a d8 appears to be a mistake, but white might be better already. Even if black were to play some retreat move, I get to play rook c1 with tempo. I control the proceedings. I'm not going to concern myself about winning this pawn immediately, because black can defend it with the bishop, but just overall, the structure is nice for white. I can look to attack maybe even the queenside pawns. Maybe I can invade on the 7th rank somehow. Maybe I'll even start moving some of my king pawns later. So it's a nice position. So after this, black came in with the rook to d2, but I think rook a d1 is a nice way to neutralize the pressure. All I want to do is swap and try to keep that extra pawn. So I'm immediately attacking the invading rook. I thought about rook a c1 for a second, but I think this rook should be bound for d1 anyways, so I passed it up. Yeah, there's no reason to give black an opportunity to go and attack f2. So here, queen c3. I took and then played rook d1. This looks to be fine. And here, the engine wants to play rook f1, but is there anything wrong with what I did? Queen takes. Okay, he could try bishop e6, which stops queen d5 at least. And then say rook f1, queen takes a2. Aha. So going after the queenside pawns. And white still has a sizable advantage, but black has eliminated one of those dangerous pass pawns. I could see myself going for something like this and trying to grind out a win with 3 versus 2 on the king side, although it would be difficult. So maybe in that case, I should have done what the engine was saying, which was back here, just take on b7 directly. Rook takes f2. Oh, that's interesting. Because if I take with the king, they have bishop c8 check. Discovery on my queen. But queen d5 is good. Rook f7. And now knight takes f5. Rook takes. Queen takes e4. Again, white's up a couple pawns. My king is a little bit loose. But 2 pawns should be worth the discomfort. So moving forward a little bit in the game, black played bishop g4 instead. Yeah, bishop e6 looks best. Note that if queen takes a2 right away, I can play queen d5 and then go take the bishop. Or even play knight takes f8, f5 right away. Because if takes, rook d8 check, rook f8, queen d5 is going to checkmate. King h8, rook takes f8. So that too is working in white's favor. So bishop g4, I just gave a check to force black's king here, and now their back rank is substantially weakened. And I went for queen d2 looking for a trade. This seems best. Guarding f2 in the process. And note that rook takes f2 is going to lose to queen d8 check. Force the rook to come back and checkmate. I thought black's best bet might be like taking and then trying to use the bishop somehow to stop these pawns, but I'm sure it's lost. I'll just have to carefully move these pawns up the board. Maybe even go attack the e pawn, as the computer is saying. Rook d4. And I think for the rest of this, it's just a matter of pushing the pawns and avoiding any egregious blunder. Yeah, black was trying to cook up some stuff on the king side, but really their only hope is to coordinate the rook and the bishop, because these pawns cannot be stopped in the long run. So right here they were threatening rook c1, but rook b1 is a tidy way to deal with that. And here come the pawns. And soon over. Okay, so I'm happy with this game. This was a nice strategic game in an e4 opening. And I would question this entire line with queen b6. This doesn't seem quite right to me. If I were black, I would play the knight c6 followed by taking and then f6. I don't think playing queen b6 is really worth it for black, but I could be wrong. Feel free to post if you play this line for black. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be back again soon with another one. Talk to you guys later.